The most important thing in your spiritual awakening is to realize it doesn't come from books, although books can be helpful for us. It doesn't come from mentors. It doesn't come from anything else. It comes from your divine eternal nature. And each and every one of us is born of that reflection of whatever you want to call it, that Alpha, Omega, that God source creator. There's a lot of paths leading up to that. There are so many paths so that everyone can find their way to their divinity inside. Turn the mirror back on yourself. Find that kingdom within yourself and then live from that. Live from that faith and trust. They often say that we are not here by happen chance. We have contracted to be here. And certain things we have been promised. We've been promised that we will be more guided, cherished, adored, and directed if we just allow ourselves to co-create our lives with spirit. My name is Candy Hough, and I'm a Reiki master teacher. I'm a #1 Amazon International bestseller. Let me see. I have my business, Angel Healing House. I've had that for 22 years now. And I basically had what many people call a walk-in experience. This happened on January 11th of 2003. At that time, I was going through the worst time in my life, very traumatic 26-year marriage, abusive marriage, very controlling, very manipulative. And basically, I'd lost all my light. So I did not know what a walk-in was. I was not terribly spiritual. And through miraculous and divine intervention, I was led to the people and to the circumstances that confirmed to me in no uncertain terms that this is what I had. I think the best way to approach this topic of a walk-in is to start with a definition. That's really important. What is a walk-in? Now, there are a lot of definitions for walk-ins out there from people who haven't had the experience. So I have a little bit of an added bit of knowledge there because I had the experience. So my definition of a walk-in is that it is a soul contract between an earth soul, a soul in a physical body, and a soul who is a highly advanced spiritual soul across the veil. Now, this is made because the physical finds themselves in a position where they cannot keep their life force energy going anymore. This happens because of abuse. This happens because of physical, emotional, perpetuated, traumatic things that they go through. And some people can find their way to the light. Some people can find the strength and the courage inside of them to look up, as one would say, to a higher force and have the faith and trust in something that they believe in, that they can't see. But those who find themselves in this position, they're flying their plane in the fog and they just can't find themselves out of this loop of trauma. And the former soul, and I'll call her the former soul who was in this body because I, who am in Claire Candy's body, I, Angel Ariel, am not of that former soul. So we'll just call her the former soul. The former soul who was in that body for 47 and a half years was brought up to be very acquiescing. And she found herself to be in a position where it was natural to be controlled or manipulative. And so she married a very controlling man, a very abusive man. And she lived a life of basically servitude to that. Her needs were not important. Her idea of herself was to serve and to be of service to others, to be the good girl, to not to speak up for herself. And that went pretty much onwards for 26 years with this man and 22 years married. Now, she found the strength after those 26 years of being with him to finally be able to speak up and ask for a divorce. And when she asked and said, I can't do this anymore, he looked at her and said, if you leave me, I will see you financially ruined. I will see you in such a position that you'll be living on the wrong side of the railroad tracks, and your children will be too embarrassed to ever know you or visit you again. So after that, that's pretty much exactly what happened to her. And because she was not particularly spiritual, she wasn't religious in any way, she was very angry. She was very abandoned. She was very hurt. And when you're in that state, you tend to blame. You tend to blame everything on the outside for your position. One of the most important things in my healing practice, which is Angel Healing House, is the number one tenet is responsibility. And she really took no responsibility for being in that marriage, because we contract everybody. We contract, our spouses, children, to play different roles before we enter into this physical form. And she found herself in a position where she was just so angry. And because she hadn't done anything, Adam, to address her anger, sadness, bitterness, resentment, regret, judgment, criticism, defensiveness, all of these things, all she did was project herself out into the world with this negativity. And instead of she could have turned the mirror back on herself and said, okay, where did I play the part? Where did I play the part in at least a small percentage of bringing this marriage to myself? And actually, she knew after a year that this marriage was abusive. She found out right before that it was so karmically meant for her to be there. She found out she was pregnant, and she just didn't want to let anybody down and, sort of get rid of the baby. And she just carried on that way for 26 years together with him. So there she is. She's just so abandoned, and she's so hurt. And she was anorexic. She was suicidal. And she decided that she would hone her anorexic body by spending massive amounts of time in the gym. And she just wanted to make herself desirable. And she did. And that was her number one concern, to get revenge and to show everybody that she was worthy and desirable of a loving relationship. And when you do this and you're fueled by negativity, you jump from the frying pan into the fire. That's what happens. I see so many, and I have seen so many people in my healing practice, men, but also the majority of them are women. When they do separate or divorce, they don't do the internal work. They don't understand that their reality is only because of their energies inside. It's cause and effect, if you want to call it laws of attraction, that they created this reality only because of their energies inside. She then drew to herself a very, very handsome, charming man, 10 years her junior. He was deemed the moniker, the Italian Stallion, as he was a member of men's stripping group, very much like the Thunder Down Under, very much like that. It was a knockoff group of that. And he was oh so charming. And they made such an extraordinarily looking couple as they frequented restaurants and casinos, of course, with her newly acquired divorce settlement. She did not know it at the time, but he was a very charming con man who did have a reputation of attaching himself to the money of newly divorced women. They went on like this for a while, and he suggested that they invest, of course, her money, into a business which they could work together. So this sounded great. They bought, and this was on the Gold Coast, near Surfers Paradise in Queensland, Australia. And they bought a newly created coffee shop. It was only running for about 5 or 6 months. The people who established it only created it because they created different coffee shops around the Gold Coast, and then they moved on from there. So it was newly established, and they both signed on the dotted line. And in the beginning, it worked well. They had a few staff, but then after a few months, he didn't work as much as she did. He liked playing, he liked bodybuilding, he liked jet skiing, and he liked all these kinds of things, which didn't go hand in hand with running a successful cafe. Anyway, being the good girl, she just worked twice as hard, and her anorexic body started to lose even more weight. She started to sleep less. At about the 6 or 7 months mark, he suggested that they invest in a property which was 1 block away from the ocean. It was a stilt home, built up in case the waves come in, and it was enclosed in the bottom. We didn't know at the time it was enclosed with asbestos in the 60s. So there we are, and he looked at it. He did have a background as a builder, and he said she balked at it because it was in such shocking condition. And he said, I'll renovate it, and we can either sell it as an investment property, it's only 1 block from the beach, or we could live in it. And she was just grabbing onto strings at that stage. And she said, oh, that would be so wonderful to live 1 block from the beach in a nice townhouse. So as soon as that was signed on the dotted line, he was gone. He was gone. He was incommunicado. She couldn't find him. Now she was the sole responsibility of this coffee shop, very popular coffee shop that was in an upscale mall, and running the staff and taking over his hours, and he was just not available. Her weight started to plummet even more. I mean, it was scary when I think back, she was running on like 2 packs of cigarettes a day and lots and lots and lots of espressos. And it got to the stage after about 1.5 years of running the cafe that it came upon the very busy Christmas season. And, if anybody knows the Gold Coast, Surfer's Paradise, the population there quadruples in the summertime. Now, of course, in Australia, the summertime is November, December, January, and just increases with people going to the malls and treating themselves. And so there were extra hours that she had to work because the shopping center put on extra hours. Anyway, we had several people because it was in an area where there are lots of offices. People used to come in 3 or 4 times a day for their morning coffee, their lunch, their afternoon tea in Australia, which they have, and also, maybe a quick snack before they went home. There was a lovely Sri Lankan man, and his name was Tyrone. And as the former soul was running back and forth to fulfill orders, he grabbed her arm on the way back, and he said, Candy, he said, I'm worried about you. He said, have you ever tried meditating? And the former soul looked at him, and what she said was, Tyrone, I really do appreciate you so much, but I don't have time to shave my head, don orange robes, sit in a cave and eat rice and chant. I just don't have the time for that. Thank you very much. And she ran off. But our angels, our spirit guide team, they are very sneaky in planting seeds and then slowly but surely giving us signs along the way. Well, she'd get in the car after work, she'd turn on the radio, and she'd hear a talk show. Somebody was speaking about meditation. She'd be in a grocery store line, and 2 ladies were saying, oh, there's a great meditation group that just started in Surfer's Paradise. I'm a member of this. And there was so many things there. And every time she heard this, she got goosebumps. And she said, well, maybe there's something in this, because she was absolutely skeletal at the end of her rope. And she said, well, if it'll bring me more peace. So she bought herself a big purple. big purple pillow and incense and a book so she could meditate just correctly. And back then we had tapes, cassette tapes, and listen to them, to meditation music. And she tried it a couple of times. This was in November of 2002, December 2002. She couldn't get any more than about 10 minutes in because of the mind chatter about you're a failure. You're a failure. You failed at your marriage, and then this guy just left you, and it's just your whole life is south. There's nothing good about it. And she tried and she tried and she tried. It was the beginning of January, after this busy Christmas and New Year's season, that she was standing in front of the cafe, and one of her staff was pulling down the shutters and asked her, "What are you going to do tonight?" And she said, "I just don't have the strength for anything. I'm just going to go grab a DVD." In those days, you grab the DVD and a pizza and just go home and collapse. And that's what she did. She went home and she went upstairs, and she had every thought to go back downstairs when she saw, it looked like a light, a soft glow that was over her meditation corner of her room. And she said, well, maybe I'll try it once more. Adam, she sat down, and for some reason, she didn't turn on any music, but she felt like she just wanted to be in silence. She lit the long taper candles that she had. She just sat there, and when she closed her eyes, it felt like a blanket of calm and peace enveloped her. Now, right before she closed her eyes, on the Gold Coast in Queensland, Australia, it's 5:30 in the summertime. The window in this dilapidated house, the windows were curtainless, and the sun was beaming through. So there was light in the room. But she closed her eyes. She felt like this blanket enveloped her. And when she opened her eyes, the room was completely black. Now, remember, she'd only gotten like 10, 12 minutes before all this monkey mind chatter would come in. She looked over at the digital clock, and it said 11:11. She had no idea where those hours went, but she knows she felt dizzy and she felt disoriented. But she also knew that she had to get up in the morning early because she had to open up the cafe. When she opened her eyes, when that alarm went off in the morning, it was like she was living in a nightmare. She saw the cockroaches. Now, you ask anybody who lives on the Gold Coast in Surfer's Paradise, the cockroaches, because it's tropical, are so large you could saddle them and ride them. The house was not only termite infested, but it was cockroach infested as well. Her eyes were as big as saucers. She was aghast. She said, whose house is this? She thought to herself, well, I've got to have a shower. She went into the bathroom, and there were exposed, rusted pipes. The tiles were falling off the ceiling. She was aghast at this, and she ran into the bedroom, opened the closet, and she said, these are not my clothes. I would never wear these clothes. She pieced something together and then gingerly walked down the hallway as the warped wood was just so uneven and there were nails sticking out. She walked down the steps and she thought to grab something to eat before she went to the cafe. She opened the door, and inside were, fast food boxes and sodas. She could smell the devitalized food, the processing in the foods, the high fructose corn syrup, the additives, the chemicals. She backed away and said, well, I'll go to the fruit and vegetable vendors at the mall, and I'll get something to eat. She grabbed her briefcase. She opened the door. Adam, when she opened that door, she was paralyzed to see the sapphire blue and the beautiful blue sky, the greenery, the emerald green of God's handiwork in the trees, and she started to cry. What she didn't know then was that she was looking through the eyes of Angel Ariel, who I am. And it's just struck her, the beauty. I don't think she'd ever truly seen the beauty of nature. She jumped in her little sports car, and every other time she would wend her way, over the speed limit through the suburbs to get to her work, to get to the cafe. But this time she decided to go the ocean road, to go the slow pace. In fact, when she got to the cafe, there were many of her customers that day that said, "You're just so peaceful. You're so calm. You look different. Is there something that you've done?" I couldn't figure out what I'd done, but that all I knew from that moment forward, what was important was honor and respect. And there was no area of my life, her life, because I did not know. You don't know that you've had this walk-in experience, because that's what happens when you come from a higher dimensional reality. Me coming in from the 12th dimension, angelic realm, slammed in to the third dimension. And believe me, 2003, there was no iffy things. If you're almost in the fourth dimension, it was all third dimension, very, very heavy. And so I decided that honor and respect is very important to me. And so I separated from the cafe. I disentangled myself from that. I disentangled myself from the dilapidated, stilled home. I separated from, and basically she was separated from this Italian stallion before this, but anything to do with him, she just disentangled from, and she found herself in a one-bedroom apartment. And suddenly things and people from the cafe who she didn't know, she had no idea, for instance, that a nurse that came in several times a day because the hospice in which she worked, she was a Reiki master. And she bumped into her synchronistically, and the Reiki master looked at her and said, "There's something that's happened to you. And my guides are telling me that I need to take you through all the different levels of Reiki, because Reiki is going to be very important to you." I never heard about Reiki before. I didn't even know what it was. And so then she said, and it can be quite pricey to go through all the different levels and the master teacher level. And she said, "And they're saying that I must teach you for free." So at that stage, I hadn't gotten any settlement from anybody, anything. And I was very appreciative of that. And so there I am in my one bedroom, and I'm starting to learn Reiki with her. Now, I did not know what happened to me. And so at that stage, there were a lot of burgeoning book sections in bookstores for New Age sections. If we think back, after the harmonic convergence of 1987, when there was a tipping point on the planet where more people, there was a high percentage of people who wanted the consciousness to raise, and they had positive light energy inside, that these New Age book sessions started to really bloom and get larger in the 90s and the early 20s. Books on laws of attraction, all those movies like What the Bleep and The Secret, and all those things started to come out. Well, it was at that stage where I walked into a bookstore, and I started chatting with the manager, and the manager was a clairvoyant, and we met for a lunch, and she said, "I knew there was something different about you." And I said, "Why?" She said, "Because there was a group of angels that were surrounding you when you walked into the bookstore, and there was a light over your head that was shining as you walked through the section, that New Age section." And I said, "Well, I don't know what, I didn't know my name was Angel now. At that stage, I didn't know that I had a walk-in experience. She said, I know of somebody who could help you. And he's only 20 minutes from you. He works in a New Age shop. He's an international psychic. His name is Patrick, and he is sought after all over the world. That's the good news. The not so good news is it could take up a year to get a session with him. So, but my guides are saying, call and book this. So she said, if you can't get a session with him, I know John Chamberlain. And John Chamberlain is a man who works with the healers in the Philippines. You know, those healers that go into the body and then they take out the dis-ease. Okay, so she said, he lives about a block and a half from you, and he's coming back from the Philippines, so see if you can get a session with him. So I called Tarot Lodge, where Patrick was this international psychic, and the receptionist there said, I'd like to book. I don't care how far in advance it is. And they said, you must be the luckiest girl in the world. Nobody cancels once they have a session time with Patrick. Somebody called 10 minutes ago. Can you be here in an hour? I walked into I'm just getting shivers all over. I walked into Tarot Lodge. The receptionist met me, took me to a curtained room at the back. Said to Patrick, your session is here. Opened the curtain, and there was a man in his 60s, white hair, glasses, sitting behind a desk. When he saw me, Adam, his eyes went as big as saucers. He came around the desk. He held my hands, and he said, dear lady, welcome back. You must be very confused. Here, let me get you a cup of tea and tell you what's happened. He told me everything that had happened in the last 3 months. So it wasn't like a hypochondriac where you hear something and then you develop the symptom or something like that. But I'd already gone through all of those characteristics that walk-ins usually go through, endemic to many of them. And he said, looking at your hands, you've come back for a very important mission. He said, when he looked at his own hands, he said, he said, being from the angelic realm, you have a very important mission. He said, look at my hands. I'm just a dragon. I am a normal dragon. I read people's palms, their fortunes, their tarot. He said, I'm not putting myself down, but it's nothing compared with your mission that you've come back to be of service to humanity. And he said, but you know, dragons and angels are very, very good friends. And they come back incarnation after incarnation to help each other. Patrick has been an extraordinary support to me over these last 22 years. Anyway, it was a few days later. And let me just jump in here and say that just because somebody tells you went through something, it doesn't make it so. You know, so I thought to myself, I'm glad I made that appointment with this John Chamberlain. So I knocked on his door a week later, and I walk in. And as I walked past him, he said, my gosh, he said, look at all the angels that are coming in with you. He said, do you understand that you've had a walk-in experience and that you are an angel in human form? Now, this was shortly after what Patrick had delivered to me. So from there, I took this information. I got my 2 degrees, my master teacher degrees in Reiki in a really short amount of time. And next day, you know, I teach Reiki and had taught Reiki over the last 22 years. And people have it and they keep their day jobs and they don't treat it as a profession. But I saw this as, okay, I have a license. I'm going to get a business license. I set up, and all of these people from the cafe, I had a ready clientele, were finding me and coming in. Patrick had also told me at that stage that I was going to find my twin flame or draw my twin flame to myself. And that would be in a short amount of time. And it was, as I saw Patrick, in April of 2003. And it was in September of 2003 that I was asked to go to a Come As Your Favorite Rock Star party. I went as Stevie Nicks. I had very curly hair then. The only Elvis turned up. And 5 days later, he asked to marry me. And that was, actually, he wanted to ask me after 3, but he thought he would wait for 5, which is strange. I said, what changed in the 5th day? He said he felt the hand of God on his back, just pushing him and saying, you marry this lady and everything else will fall into place. 2 months to the day, we were married on the beach at Noosa Heads in Queensland, and we have been on our twin flame adventure. We're the best of friends. In actual, if you read my book, I Am an Angelic Walk-In, the autobiography of Angel Ariel, when she went through, I went through a sort of dark night of the soul in that 1-bedroom apartment on the Gold Coast, because during that time, I decided to take a piece of paper and to write a decree to God, saying that I really hadn't been specific when it came to love. And I wrote, I thank you, not I need or I want, because you're always going to be needing and wanting. I said, thank you. Thank you for my twin flame. Because I wanted the only other complement in any space, time, and dimension that was my other counterpart. The pen wrote, this is no exaggeration. I didn't write this. The pen wrote, I live in a comfortable home by the ocean. Now, I just had separated from the Italian stallion, or I had just, the amount of money that was gone and wasn't replenished. And I thought, I said, that's funny. I don't have the wherewithal to buy an oceanfront home. I went on to write the characteristics. But the funny thing in looking back, I didn't write down anything physical. Oh, I said he had to have some hair, but I didn't say on his head. Okay? So I write, we're the best of friends. We travel the world together. We are supportive of one another. There is nothing more important than the relationship. No money, no business, no job, no anything. This entity, this twin flame secret weapon of love and caring and kindness and loyalty, that's most important. I said, I thank you for him being loyal and kind and considerate and loving and, treating me like a princess. All of these things. And honoring and respecting me, because so much of her life, there was no honor and there was no respect. And then I was invited to this Come As Your Favorite Rock Star party. And Elvis asked Stevie Nicks to marry her 5 days afterwards. And we have been on our twin flame mission ever since. Now, telling that story, it's a long way to get to where I am now in describing to you and describing to your listeners what the characteristics of a walk-in is. It's not like a checklist set in stone. It's not, like a near-death experience or something like that, where you have to have everyone, you have to see the light, you have to see your relatives, that kind of thing. But these are things that are endemic to most walk-ins. These are the top ones. The first one is you don't resonate with the person's name. That's their name. That's not your name. I would say most walk-ins change their names because they just don't align with it. The tone, the energy behind it, it just doesn't suit them. The reason that I did not change my name is because this would have devastated her parents. Absolutely. And I figured this soul, I'm just getting shivers all over, thank you. The former soul of Claire Candy was so inextricably linked with being a good girl and controlled and following what her parents said, that this would have devastated them. And so she decided just to keep this hidden. So that's number one. Number two is walk-ins, they are suddenly aware of a change in their characteristics. change of attitudes, a change of their perceptions, a change in their style, in their clothing, what they eat. It's totally different. And this strikes them. This is not like, oh, I think I'll detox, and I'll stop eating sugar, or I'll stop eating processed food or something. I mean, this is a 180. An interesting thing was that she started to draw to herself Celtic and Irish and Scottish music. She had no idea where this was coming from, but it used to make her weep. It was like a bathtub overflowing, and she couldn't figure out where this was coming from. In my first book, One True Home, Behind the Veil of Forgetfulness, I speak about Angel Ariel's, my 5 most important past lives, because I grew the most spiritually. And one of those lives was as a healer in 14th century Scotland. And unfortunately, spoiler, it didn't end in a very good way, because the church didn't want people to be empowered. And I'll leave you to read that in the book, how that life ended. But so, yeah, you're totally aware that you are a different person now. Now, honoring and respect was not a big thing for the former soul. It just wasn't a big. This was tantamount. It was just like the top thing in Angel Ariel's life. Like the sword of Archangel Michael. I don't care if you love me or if you don't love me. I will be honored and I will be respected. So that's the second characteristic. The third is that seemingly insurmountable problems suddenly get solved. It's because we allow, not for logic, not for reason, not for justification, but we allow for this internal, intuitive knowing to be our guide. I aligned myself with God Source Creator and also with my angelic family. And the reason for this, we're able to follow our intuition so closely, is that we inherit the mental imprint, like a computer chip. Although many walk-ins say they don't remember the former soul's early years. I do remember her early years, but we don't inherit their emotional imprint. So we don't get the anger, sadness, bitterness, resentment, regret, judgment, criticism, all of those things from our ancestral and generational line that have us reacting and triggering to life, rather than being able to be clear-eyed and to be able to just see this needs to be done and get the intuitive download and go this way. And we will, we're able then to just have the seize part for us, because it's that intuitive channel that will allow that clarity of direction and purpose to lead us in life. So those another characteristics of youth-ins, of walk-ins, is they youth-in as they get older. Because she had been living primarily on 2 packs of cigarettes a day and copious amounts of espresso coffees, being at the cafe, her pallor of her skin was like hamburger meat. It was like old gray hamburger meat. Deep, she's 47, deep lines of crow's feet and deep, deep wrinkles. She looked basic and skeletal. She looked like she was on the way out. But because of the amount of light that walk-ins hold, we get younger as we get older. And my birthday's coming up on October 7th, and I'll be 70 years old. So, if you want it, people keep on asking me, what is your secret? The secret is mainly you can eat all the organics you want. You can drink unfluoridated water. You can do yoga until the cows come home. But if you don't have that peace inside of you that negates anything that's happened to you through unconditional love and forgiveness, then it really doesn't matter what, because that is the underlying foundation of your life. Now, so those are the main characteristics that will be like a red flag, to somebody if they've had a walk-in experience. Now, I'd like to talk about the different types of walk-ins. Primarily, we have known about walk-ins on this planet through the hierarchical figures like Lord Sananda, the Ascended Master, Lord Sananda. He incarnated as Yeshua, Ben Joseph, or many people call him Jesus. Buddha from a rich family was finally able to see the poverty around him, went and sat under the Bodhi tree and became this bodhisattva. These are those hierarchical figures that we most know. Primarily, the majority of walk-ins that are on the planet are starseeds. They have come from other galaxies, other planets. Walk-ins they're like secret weapons, and they've come to this planet to raise the vibrational frequency, and they are strategically placed in different areas of the world. A lot of them are placed near ley lines, for instance, like on the Sunshine Coast where I lived in Queensland, Australia, whether that's Machu Picchu, whether that's in California near the Atlantis, the ruins of Atlantis off of the Florida coast. But not always, but they're there to hold the vibrational frequency, not because of what they do, because of the energy that they're emitting. They emit an energy and they hold a frequency between 750,000 and 1 million people if the walk-in is on their game. And they've practiced the 5 important tenets of my business, Angel Healing House. My business, Angel Healing House, is built on these 5 important tenets. And people would think that the first tenet would be love, and it's not. The first tenet is responsibility. Why? Because every person, place, thing, and situation that we've drawn to ourselves, we contracted for that person to be in our life to teach us a lesson. And a lot of times, our lessons come in contrast, in hardship and adversity, so that we'll really understand and get the lesson. You can tell a child not to run on the concrete, but until they fall over, they understand not to run on the concrete. And this whole program, this whole planet of Earth has been kidnapped and hijacked. It's coming out of that into its golden age because more responsibility is being taken. And it was always meant to separate us and divide us so that we would not look inwards to this great potential inside, this divinity. Everyone is divine on this planet. I don't care what they've done. Underneath what they've done is that reflection of God's source creator, because everything comes from God's source. So number 1 is responsibility. The second tenet is forgiveness. Not for the other person, because that other person doesn't walk around saying, oh, you don't forgive me. It's not even on their radar screen. We forgive for ourselves, to lift the burden of forgiveness off of our soul. And what we experience is untold peace and untold happiness when we do that. The next following one is there's no judgment. There's no judgment. Judge ye not that ye be judged yourself. And that's why most of the ills of this planet have come from judging other people, and rather than turning the mirror back on ourselves and seeing what can be done so that we radiate a different energy out and create a different reality. The fourth is, so we have responsibility, then we have forgiveness, we have judgment, and we have gratitude and appreciation. Okay, then it's one of the highest forms of healing that there is, to be grateful for our blessings. And of course, number 5 is that unconditional love. But unconditional love for the most important person, which is ourself, which is that divinity inside of us. When I've asked my clients to look in a mirror and say, I am divine, those that are still trapped in that fog, that deep trauma of I'm not worthy and I'm not deserving, they start crying. I can't say that. I can't possibly say that. So those are the 5 important tenets of my Angel Healing House business. I get asked a lot, this sounds so wonderful. it just sounds so wonderful. I'm going to ask to be a walk-in. And this is not something you can ask for. Because when the former soul continually, and when she was in her marriage, and also when she was with a charming guy, 10 years her junior, she asked continually, unconsciously, for God to take her life. And Angel Ariel, started to visit her about 2.5 years before we came to that intersection episode in which the souls were exchanged during that deep meditation. And just because you've asked for something doesn't mean that you're, in theory, doesn't mean you're ready to do that in practice. So it took a lot of back and forth. And once it was 100% agreed upon by that physical soul, by the former soul, then we decided on that intersection episode. Some people go through this after a surgery. They wake up and somehow they're different. An accident, car accident, plane accident, all kinds of things like that. And then mine happened during a very, very deep meditation. You wake up and you know that you are just like a 180 degrees opposite from that other person. So this is not something you can consciously ask for. And I say to people who want this, who are spiritually awakened and aware, I said, if you're aware enough to know what a walk-in is, then you're aware enough to make the conscious decisions to change your energies, to change your reality. I know, because the former soul has been in contact with me. She could not go. See, when we transition, a lot of people will meet their relatives and friends who have passed on. They'll go through a reunion party. Then they'll go through like a flip holographic screen, seeing their life. It's not for judgment, but it's for them to see how their energies created their reality and what effect they had on people, places, and things. And then we go to the etheric council, where they take our book of life, they open up our contract, the contract in our book of life, and we discuss then, and then they sign off, and then you can go on. But she did not have the strength, being so like a fish out of water. She couldn't get a breath of oxygen in because of all her smoking and also her negativity and then her depletion inside. She went to Spirit Hospital. And those that are so terribly damaged, abused, traumatized, they get sent to Spirit Hospital because they're not strong enough to go through the transition phase. She actually was in there for 10 Earth years. And when she came out, she wanted to get back in the body. And I said to her, you have to do the work first. Because if you came in the body and you haven't done the work, the twin flames disappearing, Angel Healing House will disappear, everything that I've touched will disappear, because it's at a disparate level to where you are. You must do the work. And when she understands this, actually in the audiobook of my book, I Am an Angelic Walk-In, the autobiography of Angel Ariel, my husband and I were executive producers on that, and I was the narrator. And when I narrate the epilogue and I invite in the former soul, you can hear the difference in the voice. And people said it brings tears to their eyes when they read and they listen to that epilogue, because it's a different voice. And I was channeling the former soul coming in, being so grateful for cleaning up her life, because we as walk-ins can't get onto our mission unless we clean up the former soul's life. And just to answer this other question that I often get, what is the most difficult part of being a walk-in? And the two things that are most difficult for me, number one is I have full remembrance of the love that's on the other side of the veil. And especially coming into a world in third dimension and trying to find love where love was just not available, or not pure love, or not divine wholeness and completeness, with everyone wearing masks and having a different agenda, and alternative agendas and things like this. And that's why I asked the Etheric Council before I came in, I must have my twin flame or I'll take myself out, just like that. And so in a short amount of time, we drew each other to ourselves. The other thing that I have a great difficulty doing is being in this 5'3" and 3/4" body, because I am an immensely tall shard of light. I'm like 8-9 foot tall, huge shard of light. And to try to squash that into a 5'3" and 3/4" body has been extremely difficult. But you manage, and I'm very grateful for her, the former soul, to give me the opportunity to use my light and use my wisdom to help others. My mission statement for Angel Healing House is not to heal, because I don't do the healing. I state I do not do the healing. I am the conduit for God, Source, Creator, to work through as a facilitator to heal those people. And if the clients want to heal, they will heal. There have been miraculous healings through Angel Healing House. But I'm there to help people reconnect to their divinity inside. And once they do this, their lives become divine. The only hell we experience is hell here on earth, despite what we've been taught in faiths and religions. If you are filled with hatred and racism and anger and sadness, not sadness, but like bitterness and resentment and real hate and rage inside, you will only rise to the darker planes of heaven. And you don't get out of there until you atone, or you must come back and you must live and you must experience what you did to other people. And a lot of people have trouble when that is shared with during sessions. You had to experience that because you did that in a former life. So there are different levels, and we can only rise to the one which is the most resonant with our energies inside, because we take our energies with us. This is just a physical vehicle that we're in. But it's wonderful on the other side. I mean, it really is. I mean, there are different levels for those who love gardening, in landscaping and animals, and there's that whole level. Then there's the level for those creatives like writers and composers. And I mean, how wonderful. A lot of the times people who channel creative, like music and books and things like that, say, I don't know how it came to me. A lot of the times it's channeled from that level. I mean, the Bach and Beethoven and Mozart and all of these brilliant composers and musicians on the other side. And there are different levels. There are the levels for science and inventions and different technology and things like that. So, it's not just, floating around with a halo and a harp. That's not what it's about. It's about working together and collaborating and just living in pure love, if that's what you choose to do. And because we've always existed, and which is difficult for some people to realize, we've always existed, we still exist, and we will be existing, because energy is just energy. And it just changes depending on, that's why I always say on my YouTube channel, or when I had my Blog Talk Radio show for 12 years, remain a child, remain teachable, remain curious, remain in a state of wonder and enchantment to discover more about life. Because when you're in that energy, life then can bring things to you. And then you have more experiences for your soul to grow. We have a personality. Our soul, out of the billions and trillions of souls in existence, when we drop out of this physical vehicle, we have such a unique, special, energetic signature that we are able to be discernible out of the billions and trillions of souls. We are unique, kind of like fingerprints or snowflakes, that kind of thing. We take that energetic signature personality or characteristic with us. In my book, One True Home Behind the Veil of Forgetfulness, and I speak about those 5 most important lives, I drop into my life as an Egyptian princess, as the healer, 14th century Scotland, as a courtesan in Venice, Italy, as all of these things. And I wear this physical vehicle in the times and circumstances that I contracted to be in, and I play out this human game to learn things from there. But then when I cross over, I take this energetic signature with me. And yes, you do, because you have clarity when you, and you have access to your book of records as well. So at any time that you can go to the Hall of the Akashic Records and just look up, what it is that you're looking for. But we basically have this unique energetic signature about us, our characteristic, our personality. We don't get stuck. We have free will. We have free will. And a lot of those souls who say they get stuck, they want to hang around. They want to hang around and see how people are laughing at their funeral, or whether they're, beating their chests and crying that this person is gone. They want to hang around to make sure that their loved ones are okay. Or they just don't want to go across the veil. A lot of paranormal things happen because of this. But, you get stuck because it is your choice to get stuck. Earth is the hardest. It is the hardest planet to learn your lessons here. And those that decide to incarnate here, we are lauded. We are lauded like you cannot believe, because it's a human game. It is a human game. We don't realize, the consequences are so vast, and the contrast is so huge, and that just gets all veiled from us when we come in. So yeah, you're right in saying that, that's one thing of being an earthling, is that we go through this birth and then this death, and then hopefully we have some insight along the way that makes, the next part or the last part of our journey, hopefully it's a majority of the journey, lighter and more radiant for us. The most important thing in your spiritual awakening is to realize that it doesn't come from books, although books can be helpful for us. It doesn't come from mentors. It doesn't come from anything else. It comes from your divine eternal nature. And each and every one of us is born of that reflection of whatever you want to call it, that Alpha, Omega, that God source creator. There's a lot of paths leading up to that. And there are so many paths so that everyone can find their way to their divinity inside. Turn the mirror back on yourself. Find that kingdom within yourself. And then live from that faith and trust. They often say that we are not here by happen chance. We have contracted to be here, and certain things we have been promised. We've been promised that we will be more guided, cherished, adored, and directed if we just allow ourselves to co-create our lives with spirit. We are always where we're meant to be. Then nothing is a mistake. It doesn't happen randomly. Even if you think it shouldn't be happening to you, it's happening for you, because it's for your highest good. And you can laugh in the face of diversity and circumstances if anything happens, and to know that you really are held. You are held within the arms and the hands of God Source Creator, and speak to your own angels. It's really important. Soon after I awakened, I woke in the middle of the night after my walk-in experience, and there was a ring of light around the room, these tall shards of light. And they spoke to me and they said, "We are your angelic family. We are the Posse of Angels. We go behind you. We go before you. We will always be with you. You are one of us, Angel Ariel. And they said, we number 537. And I said, why? They said 5 is the number of change and challenging people's perceptions. Number 3 is the number of creation and miracles. And 7 is the number of doing God's work. The Posse of Angels, they won't tell me whether I'm number 1 or number 537 to keep me humble, but they say we must keep that energetic number going. And if somebody from the Posse of Angels walks out for any reason, somebody must come in as a placeholder to hold that. You are just as divine. Please remember that.